Good morning, everybody. Welcome to ETOA's webinar this morning. My name is Tim Fairhurst, and I'm very pleased today to be joined by Alessandra Priante and Luís Araújo from UNWTO and Turismo de Portugal, respectively. As our wonderful attendees are just starting to roll in, what I will do is now play the excellent video from UNWTO, which is going to get tourism moving again, right, Alessandra? Absolutely. Indeed. So sit back, 2 minutes of video, then the discussion and introductions will start. Well, there we have it. Thank you, Alessandra, to you and all your team.
Thank you for sharing this.
It's such an encouraging message. So before we get down to brass tacks, perhaps I could just invite both of you just to very briefly introduce yourselves for those of you out there who have not yet met either Luís or Alessandra. So Alessandra, if you would like to introduce yourself, please.
Well, I am technically, I'm the regional director of Europe, the Europe region at UNWTO, and by reality is I'm Luís Araújo's friend. So I think that counts in my CV more than the first one.
Okay. We're supposed to have an argument later. Luís, go.
This is not fair. I was going to say the same. Well, I'm Luís Araújo. I'm the CEO of Visit Portugal, Tourism of Portugal, the National Tourism Board in Portugal. And I'm not a friend of Alessandra, and I'm a great admirer of Alessandra, which is even more important.
Okay, right. The Mutual Admiration Society has started well. This one's obviously going to be a very quiet, calm webinar, but thank you very much for joining us this morning. We're going to get into some controversial topics today, and neither of our panelists are known to be shy at expressing opinions, so we'll see if we can get some discussion going. I'd like to encourage people to submit questions. You'll see there's an option just to type in some questions. We also have some polls that we will run through the course of this webinar, so we'll be inviting participants to have an opinion about various things from sustainability to politics. So I think just to get the ball rolling, I think what I'd like to do is talk about Europe opening up and borders. We know for the European Union last week was looking to encourage non-Schengen source markets to be possible candidates for coming back to Schengen, providing this reciprocity, providing the epidemiological conditions are the same, providing it's coordinated. But coordination is not something we have seen a lot of in terms of border opening. Any general reflections about the current state of play? Any grounds for optimism that things are going to start moving quickly? Either of you.
Alessandra?
Luís, go. Here you go. I could just feel Luís had something to say there.
I mean, you're a country, so definitely you have a very, as well, specific vision. So I would encourage you to start.
Okay, so I'll start. Thank you so much, Tim, for the invitation. It's great being here and great being with Alessandra discussing these subjects. Opening is a very tough word, especially when you have so many factors around the opening that you don't control. And I have to say that the biggest issue now is you have so many factors that they're not on your hands that make your life impossible. I think I'm speaking for any country in Europe or any country in the world. It's not only about Portugal. Of course, we're doing our job. I think everyone is doing its job in terms of preparing its equipments and companies and tourists for what will be the new life in tourism and all that. But what we see now is a lot of misunderstandings and miscommunication and different messages from each country. Some countries open with other countries. Inside Europe are worried with the 1st of July opening to outside of Europe, but then inside Europe we have different rules for everyone. So I would say that for us, this coordination, I don't want to say this coordination, but yes, I'm going to say this coordination. It's really impacting not only in terms of business for our companies to be prepared for the future, or at least have a short-term plan or a medium-term plan for their businesses, but also affecting the trust on the clients, on the consumers.
Sure.
And for us, this is the most important thing right now.
Yeah, and certainly just to pick up on the trust, people are looking for the evidence. They want the scientific basis for the decisions politicians are making. Otherwise, they're looking behind it for whatever other motives there might be. And we've seen a growth in bilateral arrangements. It is confusing. It's very hard for the travel industry to work out what's going on. And it is a mixed message to the consumer. Alessandra, any reflections on the whole borders debacle? What's going on?
Well, first of all, as you can imagine, Tim, I wanted to, I mean, before starting, I'm going to be as politically correct as Luís just in the beginning and thank you and him. Definitely, as I was saying, this is the best webinar so far I've participated in all these 3 months. So this COVID-19 obviously has some good effects. No, I would say we, as UNWTO, we were following very closely all the evolution. And we have to admit that in the beginning, we all started by not being that scared because we've been through SARS. We've evaluated that. So we thought it was just, you remember in February when we were in Brussels, actually, Luís, when we were with Rita Marques as well, she came with us to Brussels on the 18th of February. We spoke COVID. We were advocating for a greater positioning of tourism in the European institutions. But mostly, we were reassuring everyone and we were sending a good message to China. Nobody would have thought that this tsunami would hit back on Europe. So what we've been doing, we've been following very closely the evolution, trying to keep our feet on the ground. And we all established, we had our famous 3 scenarios that were imitated all over the world, sometimes even without quoting. And I have to, pull the ear of OECD for that. With the 3 scenarios, one of them depends on, of course, the opening on the different dates, and one of them is now, 1st July. So we reopen international borders 1st July. We will have a decrease in international arrivals globally, so not just Europe, around 58%. I have to be very honest with you. In the beginning, we were not happy for the lack of coordination that we were noticing. It's because it wasn't just the epidemiological situation. It was like, it did feel like that there was something else to it. So countries were taking advantage of situations to say, look, if you're planning your next vacations in the future, don't look at that country. In Italy, Tim, you live in Italy. You live this on even if you're British, like the Italians were considered the untori, as we say in Italian. I wouldn't know how to find an English translation for that. So it wasn't nice, because the point of the European Union, it's a political union, and there was a lot of discrimination happening on no base. And we did understand the fear. Nobody saw it happening. Nobody saw that it was going to be so impactful. Nevertheless, we were really confronted with the fact that Europe, probably as an institution, doesn't have all the power that we think it has, because the sovereignty of states when it comes to national health is above all, which means we were observing. Everybody had closed borders, not just internal, not Schengen, you know, for the external, but Schengen was basically suspended. And all of this for destinations, especially like, for example, Italy or Spain, you have examples of destinations that do not live without international tourism. Imagine Capri without the Americans. Imagine Ibiza or any other destination without the Germans or the Brits. Imagine even Barcelona without the Brits. So that posed an issue which unsettled everything and everybody. But the governments were saying it's our national health, so we need to be protected. I personally think that the lack of coordination, or that you might get a small advantage now, but since you're not guaranteeing the safety for anybody, because what you're basically saying is, look, I had less epidemiological cases, so I can reopen quicker. So, for example, some countries, the first movers club, they're saying, oh, yes, we're welcoming the Chinese again. Who guarantees them, especially if you have islands, that this is not going to start a second wave? And who kind of guarantees all of us that we reopened internal Schengen, that this second wave is not actually going to be originated by the countries that in the first wave were safer? This is why I think that, you know, coordination should have not been just a political choice, but maybe a little bit of a wiser choice to say, okay, maybe we reopen a little bit later, but maybe all together with general rules. Right. And the other thing that we always insist a lot on, Tim, allow me to say that, is to lead by examples. Yeah. We as UNWTO often look for examples that we can bring to the other countries on how you're facing things. And I'm not just saying this because Luís is here, but, you know, I've said this in every other occasion, every possible interviews. Countries like Portugal that have adopted a whole of government approach, an holistic approach, and were a bit more, you know, they would say, okay, maybe we'll open not just immediately, but when we open, we will make sure we are clean and safe. So that is the things that, to me, they talk coordination. Coordination is internal, coordination is external, but it has to be there.
Sure. And it's not just consumers, it is business. I'm going to read a question from Renata Forte in Austria, which actually illustrates exactly the point you're making, Alessandra. I do not understand the policy in Europe. I wish that travel warnings would be coordinated. Example, in Austria, we have a travel warning for Spain and Portugal. Even flights from those countries could not land in Austria. In Germany, there's a travel warning only for Spain, not for Portugal. Is there any way that UNWTO can act on a better united coordination in EU countries? I know the answer to that. The answer is that Alessandra is extremely persuasive, but as she says, this is a member state competence, and it is causing a lot of difficulty. I'm going to ask the attendees to respond to a poll, which is really asking whether we, as an audience, think that tourism has got the support and priorities it needs. So for all you people listening in, please answer the question. So just to read out the question, today, tourism has the political priority and practical support it needs. So I'll just leave that open for a minute or two. Luís, any responses to the frustration we heard there from Renata in Austria?
The frustration is what we see and what I was telling at the beginning. The consequences when we see consumers and tour operators and travel agents not knowing what to do. And we had a few weeks ago some orientations from the European Commission based on the meeting that there was with all the ministers of tourism of the European Union. And we had very clear messages of how we should do the opening. Well, I think the first important message was for the first, I don't want to say for the first time, but for a very long time, tourism was recognized as a very important activity for any country inside Europe. It's not only a matter of being important to the South European countries, it's important for every country. And I think that has to be the basic argument for any discussion. And then if we establish that, we need to find ways to open in a coordinated approach. And what we see now is that, I don't know, of course, I understand that governments take decisions based on lots of factors, and there is a biggest reason, or a bigger reason, which is the control of the epidemic situation. But I want to believe that every country is doing their own job in terms of protecting their own citizens as well as tourists. So if we're all doing our job, we should be having a coordinated approach to this.
So, let's have a quick look at those results. So I can see them, hopefully you can now. It's not a great vote for the case that tourism has got a sort of coordinated political strategy here. That 73% feels that tourism does not have the political priority and practical support it needs. So plenty of work to do. Let's just look at one more question before we move on. This is from Michael in Italy. Does the panel feel that tourism normality will only follow once a vaccine or reliable antibody tests are available, especially for mice? Any thoughts on that, Alessandra? Are we going to wait and see for the vaccine, or is it the case that consumers will just take a view?
Absolutely
My life involves risks.
Not. You know, Tim, we made a deal as well with Luís that we were going to be straightforward, and we were going to also share some clear ideas. I never believed, and I can guarantee that my SG thinks the same, that vaccine is the thing that we should wait for. There's no time to wait. If we wait any longer, 70%, 80%, 90% of our SMEs will not be able to reopen. We need business. We already know 2020 is lost, because in touristic terms, 2020, we're end of June 2020, so basically 2020 is lost. So we can start saving. We can guarantee that thin line that would allow companies to just surpass 2020 and restart actively 2021. For this reason, whatever can be done now, implementing all the measures, spreading all the good messages and everything, has to be done. There's no waiting. Consumers can wait. Let's put it like this, because, okay, 1 year we don't go on holiday, we're not gonna die. Companies will die. And this is, we cannot afford that, because this will be the biggest disaster. And as often people, you know, in the beginning of the quarantine, we used to say that we're not going to die of COVID, maybe we're going to die of hepatitis or of obesity for how much we were all eating and drinking. I can guarantee you that these type of deaths, when you completely destroy the substrate of an entire sector, which is so wide and so horizontally impacting, you will not be able to recover.
I mean,
so,
could I just pick up a phrase from your video, actually? You talk about tourism having the widest value chain and the deepest social footprint. I mean, this is something that has a very, very broad horizontal impact across the whole value chain. And tourism's not in a little nice to have box. It's very central to the health of the economies in Europe. And Luís, before we went live this morning, I just mentioned a discussion we had with some of the regions in Portugal and the neighbors across the border in Spain. There's an awful lot of creativity there, particularly in rural areas who are looking to offer product which perhaps is going to be appealing to people looking for less crowded destinations and so on. But the opportunity of cross-border travel, Portugal, Spain, is enormous. Right now, it's not possible. But do you think the current situation is going to be a catalyst for innovation, particularly away from the bigger cities? You know, is long run, is this going to lead to some product diversification?
Well, we were seeing that a lot previously to COVID. A lot of coordination, a lot of joint programs between Spain and Portugal, especially in the areas at the border. We launched a program which was the castles in the border. We only had castles to protect us from Spain, so now we have to use them as a tourist attraction. But I agree entirely with Alessandra. If we wait until the vaccine or whatever to start moving, it's the end of many countries and very big countries. France is the biggest tourism destination in the world. Spain is the second or the third. So it's not about, I think that's why I think it's so important to have clear communication on what's happening in each country and in the entire world. It's based on responsibility. We know what we have to do to prevent the virus. And it's based on us, but it's also based on, us as individuals, but it's based on the institutions and the companies. If all of us work together, then there is, we should start flying and traveling and doing the things we did with different precautions, of course, but taking advantage of everything that it's still here. And that's our biggest message to the world right now.
Right, and the Clean and Safe campaign that Portugal launched really as a signal to the world that there are ways of managing risk and conducting business in a way that does look after staff, look after clients. Are you seeing a lot of support in the supply chain? Are people going, yeah, we've got it, we need to do this to restore confidence? Are you seeing any demand there as a result?
Incredible support, I have to tell you. We started with hotels, travel agents, and tour operators, and now we have more than 16 categories, from museums to rent-a-cars to golf courses, venues. Everyone wants to have the stamp. It's not because of the stamp, it's because of they have clear rules on what to do, and people need rules. They need to understand what's important to prevent the virus, and the consumer needs trust. And now we launched last week something that was missing. There was the missing link, which was how can we engage people and consumers on this? So we launched a platform, portugalcleanandsafe.com, where you have on the map of Portugal the more than 15,000 stamps that were issued until now. And you can make an evaluation. You know, if you're in a restaurant, what do they comply with? And if you think they're not complying, you can either press the yellow or the red button. And if you press the red button, there is an internal protocol that we make an audit immediately.
That's super
you need to have 5 yellows. You need to have 5 yellows to get an audit. But it's a matter of, once again, responsibility. We know what we have to do also to prevent ourselves and to protect ourselves. A 5-year-old children knows. So,
sorry to interrupt, but just exactly on this point, one of the things we've talked about in the past is what's great about European tourism is there's so many independent small businesses. That whole mosaic of independent stuff makes it very distinctive and very diverse. But on the other hand, it can be harder for a small business to change its systems than a large chain. And I've got a question here from Steve Galpin. Good morning, Steve. And he's reporting that he's hearing from agents who are asking only for branded hotels in 2021 who've got set COVID-19 rules for arrivals and bedrooms and so on. So he's suggesting it's important that independent hotels make their rules clear and publish on their websites so agents and guests can see. And I guess Clean and Safe is an initiative that will help the very diverse and strong independent part of the hotel sector in Portugal.
Of course, we do have, I won't say it's a problem, but we're having so much demand now that even cities and tourism destinations want to be clean and safe.
Sure.
We have circus that want to be clean and safe. And the circus can be a tourism attraction too. So, but I think this is, it has a deeper reason, which is the need for companies to understand and to have clear information on what they have to do to be prepared. And sometimes we speak about trust in terms of consumer. We forget we need to give trust also to companies that they're doing the right things. And that has been clearly the focus of what we're doing, and I know many countries are doing. We've shared the Clean and Safe with many countries inside the European Union. Some of them have used even the logo, which I think it's beautiful, and I think it's perfect. And we don't need the credits, and we don't want the credits.
Good practice sharing.
Yes, because those are the good practices that stimulate traveling. And what we do need now is stimulating traveling. Anything that gets between traveling and ourselves is the worst thing that's happening. And we've seen many misinformation, many communication made by media, which is not accurate or not correct. And this is terrible. This is terrible for the economy. This is terrible for ourselves.
Thank you. Alessandra, I'm going to invite you to just comment on the health-related questions and how to restore confidence. And then we're going to move on to an area I know is very close to UN mission around sustainability. But I'm going to launch the next poll on sustainability in a moment. But Alessandra, do you have any further reflections on what measures we can do to restore confidence in a way that's not going to confuse the market and is going to help both business and clients?
I completely share what Luis was saying, completely, because the thing is, we need to let people know what's going on. I give you a very small example of my home country, Italy. I have lots of restaurant owners, friends, who were sharing with me their despair because the rules are completely unclear to them, so they don't know. How many meters? 1 meter, 2 meter? What do they have to do? The problem is when you're sitting together, more than 2 people, you have to declare that you're part of the same family. Obviously, you lie because you don't go out with your family. You go out with your friends, okay, most of the times. So you're going to say that these guys, in order for them to be in your table, they're living with you. So already you're lying in a self-certification. Then what is he supposed to do? The restaurant owner is supposed to come and check. Is he supposed to come and check your fever? How is he sanitizing the toilets? I'm sorry I'm being so specific, but what Luis was saying is key. The main thing is to train them. We are all at home, okay? And if we're expecting businesses to reassure us and to make us feel safe and still give us the same joy and entertainment that we look for when we go out, whether we're going out in our own city or an international destination, then it's all about how the private sector feels empowered to implement those rules, communicate those rules, and transmit that confidence to the consumer. If they're the first ones to be confused, unsettled, feel unprotected, either they're not going to open. It's like 60% of the Italian outlets, whether it's hotel, restaurants, and other things, are not opening, or they're going to open, but they're going to be dubious. And then the first time there is a check that comes, the police that comes and finds them, that's it, they're shutting. So let's consider that they need, as Luis was saying, they don't need as much support. I would think that they need the extra mile, they need the extra support, because the government should empower them to be their own advocates about how safe is the destination that they're going to.
And Italy is going to be allowing flights from all over Europe to land quite soon. So, people are not so far apart on the plane, even if the middle seat is empty. So having stricter social distancing once you get onto a terrace doesn't seem to make any sense to anyone involved. So I think, how we manage our own risks and getting consumers to also think hard about how they behave. It's not that the travel industry has suddenly become part of the public health infrastructure. Individuals need to take responsibility, need to have insurance, need to be smart. I'm going to move on to sustainability, because I know it's been a very big theme in Portugal's development over the last few years, and it's certainly something people are talking about in the context of recovery. So I'm going to launch the next poll. Here we go. So social sustainability goals should have a big impact on tourism in Europe. So this is to do with, does the community like tourism? Is the community involved in tourism? Does tourism evolve in a way that is spreading the benefit around? So encourage people to have their votes. I'll leave that open for a minute or two, but perhaps Alessandra again, if I could just go back to that thought from the video, the idea that tourism has got the deepest social footprint. Do you want to elaborate a little bit? I remember when we talked before, or Easter, you said that perhaps rural areas of Europe might benefit from a change in consumer sentiment. Have your thoughts developed on that? Where do you see social sustainability in policy development now?
Well, I think, well, you're talking about social sustainability, so you're already restricting.
Yes, we'll get on to environmental later.
Yeah, exactly. So you're already highlighting one of the three, let's say, areas of the impact of sustainability. I would say that social sustainability cannot be considered isolated with respect to the rest of the types of sustainability, if you allow me. What we're seeing at UNWTO is that sustainability and innovation have to become the new normal. And what I normally refer to the new normal is not anymore the word that in the past has been used as a desire or a word that would make any national strategy look a little bit more up to date, Agenda 2030. Now sustainability needs to become the way of behaving. And when I'm saying way of behaving, I'm specifically referring to policy making into destinations, which to me translates into management. We cannot just, once we have the vaccine, once we have whatever we have, translate all of this into, okay, we go back to the before, to the numbers of before, to the way that we were doing things before. There needs to be a lesson learned, and the lesson learned has to run through the sustainability lines of analysis, which means that, for example, you need to know the impact of tourism into your own territory. And you need to know that tourism has to be part of the integral and larger society at all levels, whether it's environmental, economic. Once you know that, your approach should also be, okay, I'm not just going to be on the other side counting the numbers of people arriving, because this is the biggest misunderstanding of tourism, I guess. I mean, tourism is all about future reality. When we talk of tourism and we report tourism, we talk about the numbers of last year. So we should measure, I think, tourism from now on in its impact and a forward vision, meaning what is my objective? And then have I reached my objective or not? Objective includes everything. Objective, I mean, Portugal once again is leading, for example, on digital. So the approach that destinations have in the digital environment should allow destinations to say, okay, this is how much I can handle. This is what I would like. And this is how I want to pursue what I would like. And then to go back 1, 2, 3 years later to say, okay, how did I manage reaching that goal? And how did I actually keep it, measuring sustainable tourism impact, keep it, respecting the rules, whether it's, as I said, environmental, protecting the environment and the biodiversity, whether it's social, whether it's economic. I think if we don't do this and we just go back to normal, no vaccine can save it.
I've got some encouraging news for you, Alessandra. I'm just going to show the results before I invite Luís to comment. And I know Portugal's done a lot of work with the tourism observatories and lots of community consultation about how things evolve there. But this is, I think, the first 90% agree result we have. Here we go. Social sustainability goals should have a big impact on tourism in Europe. That's 90% say yes, they should. So that's encouraging. But what is that going to mean in practice? And Luís, Portugal has been doing a lot of work in this area. You do have a very detailed and because of the way tourism is structured, you have a national framework where the regions do feed in. What are you seeing in terms of what you're measuring and how you set your goals? So as Alessandra said, here's what we want. Did we achieve it? How's that working?
Yeah, no, it's very interesting. It's very interesting, the result. We launched in 2016 the strategy for the next 10 years, so until 2027. And it has a very clear focus on sustainability. And we made some goals, and we've decided to put some goals in terms of social sustainability, which were very simple and are very simple. We want to have 90% of the people inside historic centers of big cities happy with the activity, with tourism activity. We want to diminish or reduce the seasonality in tourism in the country, because we always say that seasonality is the biggest enemy of employment. And the third one was we wanted to increase the training of our staff. In 2016, 60% of workers in Portugal had basic teaching. So training was crucial. And when this started, and during these past three months, we've been analyzing the strategy and thinking, should we change something? Should we put an extra goal, like improving the other regions or whatever? And we realized that we had no need for that, because the same goals are so allied with what's happening right now that it's really important that we focus on them. Of course, we have exactly the extreme. Now we have news in the newspapers and TV series that show how empty Lisbon is right now, and what a disaster that is for the locals that are living there. So the way we address this issue and these goals for sustainability, social sustainability, are much more important now. On another perspective, 60% of local lodging of Airbnb is outside the city centers in Portugal, and these are the ones who are suffering more, because they will suffer for the next few years. So our goal here is trying to address these issues more permanently. These past 3 months, we've been giving training, online training, to more than 30,000 people in Portugal. Only our schools. Trying to bring them the innovation, the digital market, the technologies that they have at their own disposition. And I think we've had these 3 months of people. The first weeks were we were trying to survive. But then I think, and I'm not sure, but I hope everyone is feeling this inside Europe, people are trying to reinvent itself in the way they communicate with their clients, in the way they prepare their product. Everything is changing. And I think this is good news. Hopefully, we will not go back to ground zero when the flights come in and everything will happen again. So I think this is really important. The environment part is what I'm concerned with. We will get to that.
We're going to get onto the environment in a second, Luís. Sorry to jump in, but Alessandra, just to sort of take that point, you very much put sustainability and innovation together, and you've worked in national and regional organizations, and you're aware of sort of where the money goes. Question for both of you, but perhaps Alessandra to start. Do you think that the current setup with DMOs, are we doing what we can to ensure that there's a really creative dialogue between public sector and private sector? So this sort of vision of what tourism could be is something that is co-created between the private sector. So it's not just a question of the state saying, we want this, and sitting back and hoping it happens. It's much more creative dialogue that's going to lead to the change that you want to see. So Alessandra first, and then maybe Luís for any further comment.
Tim, the reality is that if somebody more important than me many years ago said a sentence that I truly believe in, and I hope I can incarnate myself in the way that I act, is that if you want to change the world, you have to be the change in the world. At the end of the day, believe it or not, we're always advocating for somebody else to take the decisions instead of us. In reality, if we don't take that initiative, if we are not that change, nothing is going to happen. When it comes to sustainability, we need to start, all of us, understanding, and the awareness, it's a choice that, for as much as the government can try to implement it at a regional, at a national level, at a private sector, whatever, if we don't, each one of us, implement it in our way of living, then it will be very, very difficult. I can guarantee you, I wasn't surprised by the result of the poll that you launched, because as I said, and if you allow me, the prosaic approach, sustainability is a very sexy word. Everyone likes to say that they're sustainable because it gives that little bit of aura of I am actually doing something good. Reality is that sustainability needs to become something actively practical in everyday choices from us as consumers, from us as government entities, from us as international institutions, from all of you. I think that the point is, if we don't come to realizing, and this is, let me go back and circle to the coordination in advance, that if we don't do things together now, we're going to be brought back to a situation where once again, we're going to say, I wish I'd done things together. So for example, what Luis was saying, that other countries are sharing. Actually, not only countries, Luis, if I may allow, even the biggest private sector association, which is WCTC, came up with a marketing tool. Let's talk about it, because Clean and Safe for Portugal, something that comes from the government. What WCTC is doing is a marketing tool to better communicate the safety of a destination, but definitely WCTC nor anybody has the possibility of certifying that one is better than the other. And this is why, for me, for example, these things are always a little dangerous, because when you're stamping someone and someone else is not stamped, does that mean that someone else is not as reliable as the other one? Nevertheless, having said this, what is very important, what he was saying, they're copying, and maybe they're even using our logos, but it's okay. It's for the best of it. This is exactly what UNWTO tries to do. I mean, we are looking throughout our analysis of all the member states' policies, of all the things that happen. We're trying to identify things that would stand out and would serve as an example, but then it's up to the country to follow the example. It's up to the country to decide whether a healthy public-private partnership is actually valuable. We always say that. It's not, we're not discovering hot water, but we're just reinforcing, because there needs to be that until the mentality changes. And we go to a point where we say, okay, let's do it a bit more together now. We can share the same cake, but guess what? If we wait, the cake will actually be more spongier. So it will be higher and thicker. So that piece of cake that we want to have now is going to weigh 100 grams if we wait and do things together. If we wait 1 week, 10 days, that piece might be even 500 grams. So it's just about changing the way we do things and we look at things. I'm always positive. I'm always positive and hopeful. And I think definitely we'll come to that point.
Yeah, it does feel like a consensus around having pragmatic approaches which actually do work, that people can be trained on, is the way to go as a basis for reassuring consumers. This is what's happening in destination. It's sensible. Here's how you can look after yourself. These are the very easy, practicable solutions. But Luis, you were talking about training earlier. Got a good question from Patrick Richards. Morning, Patrick, who would commend you on your initiative, but how do you measure the impact of that training those 30,000 people you mentioned? What sort of program have you got in place just to keep an eye on that investment and what impact it has?
First, let me just answer very quickly to your question between the public and private. Is there a difference? Don't we all want the same thing? I mean, and I think what Alessandra and the UNWTO is doing is precisely what we're saying. As long as you're focused on the issues and the problems, and you understand that the private sector is the one that drives the economy, all we have to do is focus on their issues, their problems, their needs, and address them. When we launched the strategy in 2016, we had a coordinated approach between public and private. So I'm always fearful of the division between public and private, because sometimes we think we're in opposite parts and we're not. And to tell you the truth, I think Alessandra has done a terrific job inside the UNWTO to make exactly that same approach in terms of the data, the information that companies need, the coordination, or trying to have a coordinated approach from the publics and the official entities. I think it's very useful. Regarding the training, we have, once again, what we did was according to what companies needed. They told us, and of course we make a balance. The good thing about digital and technological and all these technologies that we have is we know exactly which courses have more demand, which ones we have to reinforce. The Clean and Safe had a specific program just for the ones that signed for the stamp. So 30,000 seems a lot. It has been very important. The information we get and the conclusions we get, not only from the trainees, but also from the schools, from the trainers, are really important. And we've been adjusting and adapting this kind of training to the needs of the companies, which I think is the more important. And things like taking care of your client, communication with the customer, digital marketing, new technologies to improve the efficiency of your company. These subjects have been dealt during these 3 months very efficiently. So I think as long as we do it according to what companies need, we will always be successful.
That's great. Alessandra, there's a question directed to you here from Loredana. Question for Ms. Priante. In the light of what she mentioned at the beginning of the conversation and the clear conflict between state decrees and European directives, do you think we will ever get to have just a simple European guidelines ruling European tourism while making Europe move in a uniform way in situations like this one in the future? Where's your political crystal ball, Alessandra?
All right, which answer do you want, Tim? Do you want the diplomatic answer or do you want the straightforward answer?
We're not going to waste time with diplomacy here.
Okay. But let me tell you, there's no such thing. There's no such thing, meaning that, as I was saying before, the European Union is a very serious political status that we need to preserve. Everybody was lamenting that it was just financial because of the euro and political. Everyone's now calling for a more sanitary, stronger sanitary union, which means that even the standards, and it's about, okay, how do I does my insurance work in every country of the European Union? How am I going to get treated if I go to this country rather than that country, right? So let's not confuse the political, administrative, financial, juridical cohesion of the European Union, which also talks about members apply, like members that want to become members that are exiting, like the country that you come from, like the larger Europe and all the relations with the international states, with the idea of Europe as a brand. Now, the idea of Europe as a brand, for how much we all love to have the idea of Europe having, European guidelines that would apply to everyone, still has a big, small, dot, which is the diversity.
Sure. In
Europe, we were always fighting to preserve the diversity of each country. And the strength of Europe is this diversity. Nevertheless, there are some parts of the world that see Europe as Europe. So when a Chinese lands in Paris and goes to Venice and then London, he came to Europe. He didn't come to France, Italy, the UK. Correct me if I'm wrong, Tim.
Yep, it's a unitary destination for local markets. Yeah.
So there are some parts of the world where Europe works as a destination. Nevertheless, I do believe that having European guidelines is important, but those European guidelines should be global guidelines. Right. Tourism is a truly international global industry. As much as you need to be coordinated, you cannot cut anybody out. You cannot discriminate and say this only works for Europe, but it doesn't work for the rest of the world. And for example, Albania is out of Europe. Are we really doing something different guidelines than the one that Albania is doing? And are we allowing Albania to have different guidelines than us? So it's a little bit of a delicate situation. This is why UNWTO came out, and this is the video that we saw in the beginning, with global guidelines and priorities for the policies to recover. We aim at being the ones who are actually advising the government to say, look, please consider this as a starting point. If all countries in the world look at the same direction, then it's going to be less difficult to create let's say the complementarity and the coordination and the dialogue between the different countries.
So it's sort of minimum acceptable standards across the board. And if you want local customization that suits your particular country or building, knock yourself out. But we need some consistency across. Luis, please.
I have to tell you something, and I think there's That's where I always say the biggest problem is communication. Portugal has had a very effective and coordinated approach inside the entire territory. All the airports have coordinated approach, especially because they all belong to the same entity. So it would be ridiculous to have a different approach. The control of temperature when you arrive, everything, the health system, everything is working perfectly. And this information is spread by different people in different ways. So as long as we have established internally what we should do, and I think that the example of Portugal is very effective, being worried about the health system, of course, but trying to reopen and having different phases in terms of reopening your country, being very clear that each phase has different activities that will open and controlling it, and being very assertive in terms of telling if there's something happen, of course, we will have rules for those kinds of activities. That's the most important thing. If this could happen in each country inside the European Union, we would be much better.
Right, fully agreed. We've only got several minutes left, and I want to get on to environmental sustainability. And that is a nice bridge, because it is one thing at a European Union level where there are EU targets. The EU has exceeded its 2020 goals to reduce carbon emissions by 20% based on 1990 levels, and it's going to be 21, 22%, and it's ambitious for 2030. So I think a lot of us are expecting regulatory changes. There's going to be a policy response here. So let's launch the third poll. And the question is, environmental sustainability goals will have a big impact on tourism in Europe. So pick one of those responses. So now, is that going to be in the form of carbon taxes, or is it going to be more positively framed? Is it going to be about incentives for more green development? So will environmental sustainability goals have a big impact on tourism in Europe? So please vote away, and we'll spend the last few minutes talking about the implications of that for tourism, and how we think that an integrated policy response should affect business in future. So Alessandra, do you want to just kick off any initial reflections as we invite people to respond to that poll? Where does environmental sustainability sit?
Can I make a forecast?
You bet.
Another 90%?
Okay.
I'm just sorry, we can't vote. Can't we vote?
Actually, I agree. That's a limitation of the platform. I feel
we're only 3.
I can't vote either. I'm going to complain.
This is discrimination.
Yeah,
no, this is discrimination.
No, but I agree with Alessandra.
Okay, so Alessandra, what's your vote? What's your opinion of the result?
Well, as I said, everyone's going to agree. Environmental sustainability goals must have a big, I would not say just impact, I would say consideration. Because remember, when you're setting a goal, you're setting a goal for your policy. You need to have the instruments to measure, very important, how you're reaching your targets or goals. But the problem is that environmental sustainability must be, as I said before, in general, sustainability must be an integral part of looking at the future. Because once again, you've heard, Tim, once again, you're in Italy. So who better than you can actually comment when we were having all these aerial views of the drones, of the beautiful waters of Venice. And one of the side effects that we got for us being locked down is, look, when we're all locked at home, guess what? There's no pollution. Animals run freely in our cities as if it's all right. But then, it's not that we switch the engine back and we're back to polluting. And in reality, we're already polluting, because the world now is full of gloves and masks on the floor. And let me just remind you that gloves are plastic, but it's okay. Nevertheless, it's really up to us and our governments, meaning that the ones that are able to implement the rules, but also, as I said, on us as people, to make sure that this lesson is not forgotten.
Let's have a quick look at the results. Sorry, just to rush you as we're close to the hour. So that result is not as strong as the social sustainability, but that's still, as you say, 74% agree that environmental sustainability goals will have a big impact on tourism in Europe. Luís, comments from you on that?
Yes, well, as I said, in our strategy, sustainability is crucial. And to tell you the truth, I was telling it a little bit earlier. We're really worried about the future of sustainability in terms of environment, at least in Europe, because we see so many concerns regarding other issues that we are afraid that environmental sustainability will come second or third.
Sure.
And it can't be. And when we see the demand that we have now in terms of cleaning and in terms of disinfection and in terms of use of disposable equipments that we all have to use, it's really crucial that we have goals and that we have efficient measures applied to these cases. It's not a matter if it is important, it's more a matter what will we do, each one of us, either following your leads, public or private, what will we do to prevent this and to reach the goals that the European Union has established? And I have to say that we're worried because of how we see things moving. But in the end, I think this will be an adjustment of some time, and in the end, we will all go back to what we used to have and go on the positive way of controlling and having efficiency measures in terms of waste management, water and energy. That's what we have in Portugal. We want 90% of all the tourism companies in Portugal to have that until 2027. And our goals are focused on that.
That's great. So these are measurable goals that you have out there. We're very nearly out of time, but just to reflect that, at an EU level, again, the Green Deal, sustainability and digitization always were going to be the big pillars of policy for the next period, and COVID-19 is a hideous distraction on that front. So environmental goals remain very important and existential. So Alessandra, just maybe 30 seconds reflection, are you optimistic that the environmental agenda will stay where it should be in amongst the recovery plans?
I am optimistic. I'm, as I said, if the governments don't do it as much as people want, I think people should ask for it.
Okay. I think that's very clear. And Alessandra will come knocking on your door if you don't do it, everybody. So you're on notice. Luís, Alessandra, can I thank you both so much for finding time to join us. I hope we can have another chat very soon. Luís, good luck with all you're doing in Portugal. Alessandra, in Madrid and everywhere else, thank you very much for joining us. I'm now going to play a very short film, which is hopefully got some food for thought, as we're going to be hosting a B2B online product development workshop on the 20th of July. Find out all about it here. But Alessandra, Luís, obrigado, grazie. See you soon.
Thank you, Tim. Thank you, Luís. And Tim, can I just say, can't skip hope.
You can't skip hope.
We can't skip opening. That's what we need now. We can't skip opening.
One P only, remember.
You bet. Thank you both.
Thank you so much.
Welcome to City Fair 2020, Europe's B2B networking workshop for destinations, organised by ETOA, the European Tourism Association, in partnership with European Cities Marketing. This year's City Fair will be more important than ever as we look forward to 2021 and beyond. The workshop will offer one of the first occasions to have open and productive conversations about client needs and their demands for new and adaptive travel product as we enter recovery. 2020 is an exceptional year, and at ETOA we've been hard at work to respond to the changing circumstances, finding a solution to best serve the needs of the industry and our members. A live, in-person event would not have been practical this summer. Instead, we will now deliver our tried and tested B2B networking workshop online. City Fair 2020 will provide over 5,000 high-quality meetings between European tourism suppliers and those taking their product to market. A perfect opportunity to reconnect with existing contacts and meet new leads, discovering new ways to work together to ensure a successful and sustainable recovery. The registration and appointment matching system are not changing. As usual, we'll ask you to select and rank your counterparts based on your preferences. We'll then use this data to create dedicated appointment schedules. Of the day of the event, rather than attending in person, all you will need to do is log on to our online portal and participate in your meetings via video link. Once the day's sessions have begun, and again exactly like a typical ETOA workshop, your meetings will run according to schedule. Our system will log you into the next meeting automatically. Sign up today and join your industry colleagues in this cost-effective way to help stimulate the recovery of the European tourism industry. Select, connect and meet. Share your priorities and we can make the most of these very real opportunities on offer in 2021 and beyond.
Well, I can still see we've got quite a few people who watched to the end of that video. So this is the final goodbye. Alessandra, Luís, thank you so much for joining us this morning.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Look forward to the next time. All right, bye-bye.